You know, it's a question we've all wrestled with at some point. If there's an all-good, all-powerful God, then why is there so much suffering in the world? It's maybe one of the oldest, hardest questions there is. Well, today we're going to take a different approach. We're not going to try and answer that question. Instead, we're going to explore why it might be the wrong question to begin with.
Now that is a bold statement. I mean, it sounds almost dismissive, right? But the idea behind it is actually incredibly powerful. What if, for literally centuries, we've been fighting with a ghost? A problem that only exists because we set it up incorrectly from the very start.
So, the argument here is that our whole understanding is built on a flawed foundation. It's kind of like trying to measure the wind with a ruler, or maybe getting mad at the ocean for being wet. The problem isn't with the wind or the sea, it's with our tools. Our entire framework is just wrong for the job.
Okay, so to really get this, let's dive into the classic way this problem is set up, the very frame that this new perspective wants to completely tear down.
And this right here, this is the fundamental shift. On the left, you've got the traditional view most of us grew up with. God is an external force. You know, a cosmic CEO, a landlord, totally separate from the building. But on the right, you see a completely different model. God isn't separate from the world. God is the world, the lifeblood of it. And just changing that one little thing, well, it changes everything that comes after.
So this brings us to the classic logical problem of evil, which was really laid out clearly by the philosopher J.L. Mackie. He said, look, you've got these three statements, and they can't all be true at the same time. If God is all-powerful, he has the ability to stop evil. If he's all good, he has the desire to. And yet, evil exists. For Mackie, it was a logical contradiction. Something had to give.
And here is where we make the pivot. Instead of trying to argue with one of Mackie's points, this way of thinking asks a much more radical question. What if the problem isn't with the logic, but with the words themselves? What if the definitions of God, power, and goodness that we've all been using are the real issue here?
And this leads us to a really fascinating theological idea that just completely reframes the entire debate: Christian Pantheism.
Okay, so here's the core concept. It's not about a king sitting on a throne looking down on his creation. It's about God being the pulse in every single vein, the life in every cell. The big idea is that the divine isn't apart from the world, the divine is the world. In this way of seeing things, separation, that's the great illusion.
So you see what happens? If God isn't some separate ruler who allows things, but is actually the very pulse of reality itself, then the question totally changes. It's not about permission anymore, it's about meaning. We stop asking about a distant God's inaction and start asking about an intimate God's experience within our suffering.
This naturally takes us to that word, omnipotence. If God isn't a cosmic emperor, then what does it even mean to be all-powerful? This view suggests that, well, maybe we've had the whole concept of power wrong all along.
And look at this contrast. On the left, you have Mackie's idea of power. It's about control, intervention, the brute force to stop a storm in its tracks. But on the right, power is something else entirely. It's not the force that stops the storm, but the deep, unshakable stillness that is present inside the storm. In this view, real power, it's presence.
This is such a crucial shift. The whole idea of God letting something happen implies distance, right? Separation. But if God is in the wound, in the pain, in the grief, then divinity is no longer a passive observer. It's an active participant in the raw experience of pain itself.
So what does this actually mean for suffering? What is it for? To get at that, we have to look at the central, most gut-wrenching symbol in Christianity, the cross.
Now, this is a pretty radical claim. It suggests that a world without pain, without struggle, well, it would be a world where nothing really matters, a hollow simulation. Suffering isn't seen as an error in the system. It's the very friction that allows for growth. It's the language of becoming something new. If you look at it the old way, the crucifixion can seem like God's ultimate absence, just divine silence as the worst happens. But this perspective flips that entire idea on its head.
It's not God abandoning the world to suffer. No, it's God entering into that suffering so completely, so totally, that the scream from the cross is the divine scream. It's the ultimate act of solidarity, not separation.
So here's the crucial point. The goal here isn't a divine rescue from our pain, it's divine union with our pain. The power on display isn't the power to stop the nails from going in, but the power to receive them
and stay.
So now you can see how this whole framework doesn't really try to solve Mackie's logical paradox. It doesn't have to. By changing the definitions of the words themselves, the paradox just dissolves. It was a problem that was only born from one specific view of God, a distant, monarchical one.
And this brings this whole theology crashing right down to earth, into the most painful places we can imagine. In this view, the sacred isn't absent from these moments of horror and despair. The sacred is what's left when absolutely everything else has been stripped away.
And this is the final turn. The classic argument from evil uses suffering as proof that God isn't there. But that argument completely collapses if God is understood to be the primary participant in that suffering. The very evidence used against God becomes the evidence of God's presence.
And that's really the ultimate takeaway. What started out as a logical puzzle for philosophers to debate has become a profound, spiritual invitation. The goal is no longer to explain suffering away, but to find the divine presence right in the middle of it.
Which really leaves us with this one final, provocative question. It reframes the entire debate. It's no longer about a God who fails to act, but about the nature of a God who refuses to leave, even when things are at their absolute worst.
One that stays. Thanks for joining us.